John Gosden has just completed one of the most successful months of his training career. 61-year-old Gosden, the master of Clarehaven on Newmarket's Bury Road, has spent a lifetime in racing and worked with some of the greats.
I had to leave the country, 3-day work week. I hadn't done anything criminal. You couldn't get a job in this country, and that was a recession. Makes this one look like a boom, actually, and you couldn't get a job. And I was in Venezuela and working in architect's office in land development. And I used to go out to the track early in the morning before I went to do my proper job and mess around with a great trainer called Milad Ziedi, who's a very talented man, and then go, then we'd start training them at 3 in the morning there under lights, and then I'd go to the office, and then a siesta was necessary. But I got the feeling I wanted to come back into racing, so I wrote to Noel Merlis, as he was then, at Warren Place, and he very kindly invited me to come and see him for tea to discuss things. So I was on a plane back pretty quickly in September and went to see him for tea. And poor man, I told him I'd do anything. So I was in charge of the lofts and the straw bales and the feed rooms, and then he gave me a position. William Hastings Bass was there then, and he was meant to be leaving, but me and William couldn't make his mind up and stayed another year. So poor Noel Merlis wound up with 2 6-foot fellas eating his food all the time when he could have done with a light rider.
And then from there you went to Vincent O'Brien.
Yes, Noel retired in November '76, and then there was an opportunity to go to Vincent's. John Chiganowski had been there, and he'd gone, and luckily I went over and met Vincent, who couldn't have been more charming, and I was there as assistant with a lovely guy called Brian Maloney.
And you were there a fantastic time. You were there in the year of the Minstrel, Alleged, Artaeus, God's Walk. Everything seemed to be winning from that yard, and not a yard of the size that it is today.
No, it was an extraordinary year in that he had the champion sprinters. God's Walk, Marinsky was probably the best. He was by Northern Dancer on a thong and actually wound up virtually killing himself, ran into a wall. And God's Walk, he was superb. Then he had Artaeus, Be My Guest at a mile, and Artaeus winning the Eclipse. Then the Minister and Alleged, who were winning all the mile-and-a-half races. And then on top of that, he had Valinsky and Transworld winning the mile and sixes. And then Try My Best, Champion Tyrrell. And it was an extraordinary year, but he was the perfectionist. He'd found everything for every slot. And I suppose he was a fastidious planner. And the game was a little different then, but to be able to fly those horses back in that old plane we did to England and have them that quality. And didn't start well. First part of the year was disastrous. The Minstrel, everything got beaten, the ground hadn't come. But as soon as the ground came on top, and there were a lot of them American-bred horses, May onwards, it was a different story. I think you try and learn from people as you do. I don't mind it. You can learn a lot from bad trainers too. And jockeys can watch jockeys who get it wrong. We all make mistakes. Look, at the end of the day, you got to work hard. You can pay attention to detail. There are no shortcuts. There are no long holidays. You just have to keep on top of it the whole time. Have a really good staff around. You'll be lucky enough to have some good people who own horses with you, who are patient, who understand that horses are flesh and blood, that they're not motorbikes. You can't take a part in and put another part back, and really have an understanding of the rhythm of the game. And then you've got to be lucky and have the right ones come, and then you've got to realise their full potential. I've always said if their full potential is to win the Cellar on a Monday, on a wet Monday at Folkestone, and you win the Cellar, you've done your job. If their full potential is to win the Derby, and you win the Derby, you've done your job. The frustrating thing for all trainers is when you know something was good enough and it has an unsoundness problem, or has a breathing problem, or something else, and you know the frustration of not getting the way you want. There are a lot of boxes to tick, but give me a sound, healthy horse, and it's good, and it'll tries for you, then you're going to win at the level it belongs. And I think I've seen a lot of trainers down the years be really good trainers and maybe not get lucky and have the one break with a good horse. That can happen.
Deshian to the far side, Shantou the near side, it's a bobbing finish, 25 yards to go, Shantou lands the ledger to Deshianta.
Zincano and Jimmy Fortune have won the Ladbrokes and Ledger.
Arctic Cosmos gives John Gosden a third Ladbrokes and Ledger, a first for William Buick.
Mars Marvel and William Buick go clear by 3 lengths now. Brown Panther tries to close. Mars Marvel wins the Ledger. Back-to-back wins of the St Ledger for William Buick and for John Gosden. The 2011 St Ledger goes to Mars Marvel and William Buick.
You've had tremendous success in staying races of late. I think you won the St Ledger 4 times, and you seem to be, you've obviously had success in all categories, but of late it seems to be those staying races.
Got to be careful getting a label in this business. George Todd always said, if someone sends me another stayer, I think I'll scream. I think it's clear that if you've got some owner breeders, they're not breeding necessarily commercially for all the speed and the early stuff, and then the late developing horse, of which many can be very slow and go jumping. But if you have one of those and they have got enough class to stay and have a high cruising speed, but then to be able to accelerate and have a kick off the end, that's what it's all about. I mean, I've been lucky enough to train some champion 2-year-olds and colt some fillies and some champion sprinters, but I would have to note that I'm getting light on the sprinter front, so I think I better change my thinking a little bit, although I'd be going there and try and buy some Oasis Dreams this autumn if we got the right people to buy them, because you don't want to get labelled, otherwise they keep sending you bigger, weaker, more backward things, and then all be going bumper. I'll have to get a licence to go National Hunt for bumper races.
Nathaniel is in front in the King George. St Nicholas Abbey is coming home strongly. Workforce hanging his chance away, but it's Nathaniel for William Buick and John Gosden that will win a dramatic King George.
Nathaniel was impressive in winning last year's King George at Ascot, but this time, pre-race, it's a slightly different story.
I think at the moment he was due to run, always planned to run in the Brigadier Gerard. For a lot of these older horses, the better races are now onwards to the end of the year. So there's no point starting too soon in the spring, which we have to with the 3-year-olds, as you know, with the classics coming. So in his case, it was always going to be the Brigadier Gerard. Unfortunately, he scoped with a lot of mucus on him. He couldn't run. And he's in good order now.
Now, he's a horse who really progressed well last year and really was taking off. Do you think he's improved from what you've seen so far in his preparation?
Yeah, the family's the type that improves with age, and he's no exception to that. He's thickened out, he's stronger, and I think we'll just see. I can see him probably coming to his best in the autumn, quite frankly. And he's been built up gently to this, and it's annoying when you get a hiccup, but that's part of the life. You find out that they've scoped not how you want them before the race rather than after it.
But somehow that may just give him possibly a bit more scope in the second half of the season for a bit more strenuous campaigning.
Yes, I mean, as you well know, in the old days, as we were talking earlier, the programme sort of stopped at the Arc, but there's a lot of international racing now, and the Arc itself is hugely important. He wasn't intended runner there last year, but as you know, we got our summer in the autumn, and the ground was good to firm at Longshot, and the temperature was about 80 Fahrenheit, which wasn't exactly what we'd planned.
In early 2010, Gosden signed up William Buick, a young jockey destined for the top.
I work closely with the jockeys in America. When you train on the track in America, you travel together. You're like a travelling circus, really. So you've got to know a lot of what jockeys have to go through, mentally, physically, not eating, watching their weight. That plays on the mind very fast. I mean, they have to go through hell, and they have to be very fit, strong athletes. Riding 6 races, you have to be amazingly fit. You're not just sitting on a horse. A lot of people don't have a misconception about it. And I think to that extent, I've always, got on well with the jockeys and understood them. Guys like Shoemaker in the past will teach you a lot. I've only ever retained 2 jockeys in my life. The first was Frankie Dettori, who had got to a crossroads in his life and came to be my jockey at Stanley House and turned up on January the 1st, and I told him to be there January the 1st, and I opened the door and there's a shaven-headed kid there. I thought that so-and-so sent his cousin. But it was Frankie, shaved off, ready to go, and he did what history says and rode 230-something winners that year. And then he moved on to Godolphin, obviously, after 3-4 years, still rides for me. And then I was just using a lot of best available, great guys like Kevin Darley. And then I down to Manton, where Jimmy was there. And Jimmy was retained, and then he wasn't retained, but he started riding more for me as Frankie could ride less. Super jockey, Jimmy. Never had an arrangement with him, he just rode for me. Lovely guy, good jockey. And had a lot of good times together. But then when I moved back up here, the problem is I rather wanted someone who can come in 5 days a week. And that's not fair to him, he lived down there. So Jimmy rode for me quite a bit here and rode some nice ones like Daremi, you just mentioned, and Lucano to win Ledgers. But then it got to the stage I needed someone who's going to be here a lot more all the time. And I was going out to the Breeders' Cup with Frankie. I said, as a kid I've been watching, but he's never ridden for me, and he's never ridden work for, never ridden a race for me, but he looks pretty good. And he said, what's his name? And I said, William Buick. And he said, yes. So that's the only recommendation I needed. And so then I met him 2 months later, and he came here, and he's a really diligent, hard-working guy, very talented jockey, very bright, intelligent, just has a good understanding of horses, and like Frankie, a quick feel for them. So then he's a retained jockey here now, so it's the second one I've had in my life. And I'm very pleased, and he's a good guy to work with, good person, and gets on very well with all the staff. So he's part of a team, and he's here 5 mornings a week.
But it seems to me he's a gifted horseman, and also it seems to me that you moved very quickly to secure him. When you saw him, that was what you thought was what you needed.
Yeah, I was criticised for it, but you've got to take criticism. As I say, Jimmy still rides horses for me, but I just thought it was the right time, young rider, and I think he got to a plateau, and he'd come up through Kingsclere, and they'd done the most fantastic job. And it was him and David Probert, and I think they were sharing the rides. And as usually with these things, there's not room for two in a nest. And I think he's come here and he got into it very quickly. He rode a superb race first horse he ever rode for me in a race was Dar-Remy. First horse he ever worked for me was Dar-Remy in Dubai. So it started very well. And we've had a lot of great days, and like everybody, you have frustrating days. But he's a consummate professional. His father was a very talented jockey, and took him watching the races as a kid, reading race form. Probably seen him up in the jocks room when he was about 3'2", and his mother was a very good rider too. So he comes from a great family, and he's had coming through there to Kingsclere, he's had a most fantastic foundation. So a lot of it's thanks to them. And as I say, as a person, he's level-headed, which is quite important, because I've seen a lot of young boxers and people, they get a bit of quick money and then it all falls apart with all the hangers on.
Joviality's hanging tough from Cha-Cha Maidi. Joviality's just holding on. Joviality.
Fallen for you, another winner this week for William Buick and John Gosden in the Coronation. Newfangled jumped out of the stalls. He's getting a little weary in the closing stages, but nonetheless he's very impressive and absolutely routs them in the Albany.
Yet another win for William Buick and John Gosden. Camborne has come from the clouds. Oh, what an amazing turn of foot here. Camborne and William Buick, who's going to go one ahead in the jockey's title, and Camborne streaks away. Another win for Buick.
This year at Royal Ascot, the trainer-jockey combination were responsible for 5 winners, including the smart juvenile filly Newfangled.
Yeah, she was quick out and she broke so well, and they didn't go a great pace. They were all very conscious. It's a stiff 6. The ground is a little bit tiring and there's a strong headwind, and she didn't seem to be too bothered about that. And I think it was impressive that she managed to go into that headwind and go so quick, kill the race off and still see it out. So yeah, as Hughesy said, Canford Cliss did that to him, and he says, and I think that makes her a pretty good filly. Same thing happened to him, he said, in the Coventry. I suppose the one I found most fulfilling was the Coronation, with a filly I've always rated very highly, that nothing's gone right for her since her maiden win as a 2-year-old, and it all unfolded the correct way again. So, and she's always been very good, and I think Starscope ran a great race to be second to her, but that was, to me, was the most fulfilling.
Joviality, that must have been satisfying in a different sense.
Yes, I was very mindful of the filly Henry ran, but I always thought the stiff mile there might just catch her out. She's a supreme 7 furlong filly, and so it did. But I thought William rode a lovely race. He committed to make it a test of the mile rather than waiting any longer, and she's gone and shown great courage to win it, and she's a lovely filly, and her best trip is over a little longer. She's the type of filly that we'll be looking at the Beverley D at Arlington Park for. I think that should be right up her alley.
And do you see her racing on again next year or not?
Not my decision, but at this time, no reason why. But she could race at 5, but it might be the time to breed her. We'll see.
Midshar and Gatewood, Black Spirit and Quaraba, they race up towards the line. Gatewood wearing down Midshar, and Gatewood wins again, and yet another win for William Buick and John Gosden.
George Strawbridge was enjoying his first taste of success at the Royal Meeting after more than 3 decades, maybe 4 decades of owning horses in this country.
Well, I think it shows something about George Strawbridge. I said, you're a classy individual. I mean, you should have fired us lot. I said, the Baldings, myself, trainers in France, all of us should have been fired for being so slow as to get that one pulled off. Yeah, I think he's been very patient with us. But he's a lovely guy. He's owner breeder, and he breeds staying horses in America, which is an incredibly old-fashioned, unfashionable thing to do. But he's of the ilk of Paul Mellon. You know, they like to race over here, breed solid, good stock, and on nice farms. And it's lovely to have a horse like that go and win for him.
Very impressive winner at Royal Ascot, Camborne. Now, what are plans for that?
Well, he's an enigmatic character. It's the only time I tied the jockey down to orders. The rest of the time we discuss how race is coming up, and then he's got a blank canvas to work with rather than being told. But it's always a plan to ride him like that. Actually, interesting plan for him. They've put on, talking staying races, a new race, the American St. Leger, at Arlington on the big weekend there at the Arlington Million, and it's 1 mile and about 5 and a bit furlongs. So we're going to run him in that Irish St. Leger, American St. Leger at Arlington, and it could be an interesting entry in that race.
It's a pretty long race, isn't it, for America? I think there's the San Juan Capistrano.
It's mile 6 San Juan, but 4 of it's freewheeling down a hill. So no, this is a long race, and it should be exciting. We'll hopefully I have something running now into a million and joviality in the Beverly D, then he can get on the plane and go with him.
A horse who's really captured a lot of attention is the Fugue. Now, she's a really good filly. She hasn't had the best of luck either.
No, it came... She won a maiden last year, and then in the Guineas, the ground was very specialist here and most unlike Newmarket, and she ran well in ground she didn't like. Got to the Musadora and everything was perfect, and the ground was what she wanted. She's quite dainty little feet, and she just flew off it. And then she had a ground in the Oaks, make no mistake, but it was an unnecessarily rough race, and I think we'll leave it at that. And it was slowly run, and full marks to the winner. For
words said later?
No, you have to move on. You have to move on, and then of course again because of the 3-week gap, the 20-day gap. In fact, we ran her back in the Riverstone, ran into a very good filly, but again she didn't like the ground. So I just longed to get her on good to firm ground. Probably 1.25 miles, race like the Nassau. If it's good wood, good to firm, I'd like to run it. I think the owners like to run her there.
She occupies a very special box in this stable as well, doesn't she?
Well, that's Darami's old box, Pretty Polly's old box over there. Yes, so she's she's got the right haven.
With such depth in the ranks, few trainers can be in a better position to fight for championship honours.
I'm never worried about that sort of thing. I just I remember I used to come in and just look at all the horses at the beginning of the year and say, well, that's going to win that, and that's going to win that. You wind up driving yourself to a lunatic asylum doing that. You just got to feel and bring it along as it comes. These things come, they come. We've been second trainer at Ascot twice at least. One time with loads of seconds and 2 winners. But that can happen. I think you're taking on what, to my mind, is the most powerful stable in the world, with an immensely powerful breeding operation worldwide behind it. And you've got the consummate professionals of that whole team at Ballydoyle Coolmore. Yeah, you're taking on the best. And so if you run well with them, you beat them sometimes, and most of the time you get beaten by them, I'm very happy with that. That's an achievement, being up there and competing. So from my viewpoint, I think when I see the depth of 2-year-olds and quality they have, it's very hard for any of us to compete. And I think they're trying to deal with the moving of the Derby with that issue. Domestically for them, it's not easy for them to compete in Ireland, let alone in England. But I mean, I've never been frightened of competition. I'm already trying to work out who we can surround Camelot with in the Leger, We've got to. After all, they've surrounded us enough, so we'll see if we can do it. But they're great people to compete with, and I'm very happy with the way our year has gone, and I'm very aware that anything can happen. You can get a bug come into the place, and you've got to pull up for 5-6 weeks. These are horses, so you take them. And I've been in the game long enough to know how to ride the punches too.
So one day there?
If it comes, it comes. But frankly, it doesn't bother me. It seems to bother other people, but I couldn't give monkeys. You just do your best, like I said earlier, with the horses you've got. And I get a lot of pleasure out of winning a little maiden with a filly that I never thought I could win a race with, or then managing to take a rated sort of 80 and get a listed place. That gives me enormous pleasure, particularly when you're training for owner breeders. So it's not all about the big events.